These submissions have been drafted jointly by Fiji Women's Rights Movement and the Fiji Women's Crisis Center, and have since been endorsed by a number of CSOs and NGOs like FWRM, Young Women's Christian Association, femLINKPacific, Strumphet Alliance, Rainbow Pride Foundation, SEEP Fiji, with more endorsements to be collected on the final submissions that will be sent to the Commission in the coming week. The finalized written submissions will also contain references to data, reports, and the like. But in the interest of time, I will not identify them individually as I make these submissions, make these oral submissions, but they will be in the written submissions. It's funny that you mentioned that we remember the face. And I just want to, reiterate that the number here might be large or small, depending on which way you look at it, or comparatively speaking. But we represent, or we speak on behalf of women, children, and marginalized groups whose voices remain underrepresented in our political processes. Our advocacy is built upon a strong track record of pushing for progressive reforms in family law, domestic violence legislation, human rights protections, and constitutional changes. It should be stated, and I know it's not new in the room, that despite having strong laws and policies on paper, the implementation falls short in different areas. So successive governments, including the current administration, have often paid lip service to gender equality, while failing to make intentional and meaningful progress in women's representation, especially in decision-making spaces. So as we engage in this crucial electoral reform process, I only mention this because whilst reality or our lived experiences might have been disappointing in the past, we still remain sincerely hopeful that this will not be a repeat of those shortfalls. And we urge the government to genuinely consider civil society's input to uphold the rule of law, strengthen our democracy, and ensure a truly free and fair elections in 2026. There are 3 key priority areas that we will make submissions on today. The first is temporary special measures for women's representation, which I will speak on. Key priority 2 will be reforming electoral laws that govern political parties. And the third, constituency representation model based on geography. Both key priority 2 and 3 will be presented by my co-presenter, Ms. Miliana Tarai of the Fiji Women's Crisis Center. So let's, with the interest of time, kick off with the first key priority that we present today is the urgent need for temporary special measures to increase women's representation in our legislature. As we know from the work that we've been doing and the work of other NGOs and organizations, and definitely, again, not new in the room, the barriers that women face in politics are numerous and systemic. Discrimination, cultural beliefs, and societal norms continue to limit women primarily to domestic roles, while the challenges of balancing family life with political duties remain overwhelming. So equal representation of women is just not a matter, it's not just a matter of fairness. It strengthens our democracy. It strengthens our nation. So when women make up half the population, their equal participation in decision-making needs to be more balanced, inclusive for effective governance. And the research around the world has consistently shown that women legislators prioritize crucial issues like healthcare, education, childcare, and ending gender-based violence. So we've seen this impact in our own history in Fiji. The passage of the Family Law Act, for example, in 2003, demonstrated the very role of women legislators working across party lines to drive progressive policies that address the systemic discrimination. So women in leadership positions, they also serve as powerful role models, we know. For young girls or young people to look and see themselves in leadership positions, not just as participants, but agents of change. The benefits extend beyond social justice to tangible economic and governance improvements. Countries with higher female political representation show that stronger economic performance means lower levels of corruption. Most importantly, it has a profound symbolic value for future generations. It helps break down the harmful stereotypes that exist and shows that women and girls can be not just the receivers of policy, receivers of change, but like I said, the agents of change that can be leaders and decision makers in our society. So examining the current state of women's representation in Fiji is a picture that's really concerning for us. There is no clear strategy or dedicated pathway to increase women's participation in parliament. Public opinion sort of reflects this failure. 81% of Fijians believe that women are underrepresented in government. So that's, we're in agreement. But 71% recognize that, while 71% recognize that increased representation would benefit the nation, the persistent biases continue to hinder progress. So 75% of voters claim that gender doesn't influence their vote, but 40% still hold the belief that men make better political leaders and that women's primary responsibilities belong in the home. So this prejudice is reflected in the numbers. So the data on women candidates in recent elections again paints an alarming trend. In 2014, women made up just 18% of the candidates, while this improved slightly to 24%. In 2018, we've seen another decline. So the backsliding of the trends demonstrates the need for targeted interventions to reverse it. Solutions exist and they must be implemented. We need comprehensive mentorship programs to prepare women for leadership roles, dedicated funding mechanisms to support women candidates, platforms that actively encourage political engagement. And most critically, we need gender quotas or incentives to ensure that political parties nominate more women candidates. So Fiji needs targeted policies to break these gender barriers in politics to ensure that women have equal opportunities to lead and shape the nation's future. Let's talk about temporary special measures, which we feel is a necessary solution. The decline in political representation after 3 national elections under our current electoral system is, to us, nothing short of an embarrassment. Cultural, social, economic, and political barriers continue to block women's political empowerment, making temporary special measures not just beneficial, but absolutely necessary. It's not an if, it's a when situation that we're looking at here. As a signatory to CEDAW, Fiji has clear obligations to remove these structural barriers to women's political participation. As we know, or as you might have seen in your own experience, Article 7 specifically mandates the elimination of discrimination against women in political life and public life. Just in the previous election, women and women organizations were just fighting to be able to keep our name, to be able to vote with our name. Temporary special measures like gender quotas, financial support for women candidates, and public awareness campaigns have proven effective in rapidly boosting women's representation. Our Pacific neighbors provide compelling examples. The Solomon Islands has made significant progress by implementing TSMs at provincial level, while Samoa's constitutional amendment guaranteeing 10% women's representation in parliament has made it a regional leader in gender equality. The evidence from across Asia and the Pacific is clear. Quotas work. Countries that have achieved at least 30% of women's representation in parliament have all implemented some form of quota system. Vietnam's requirement that 35% of electoral candidates be female has resulted in 1/3 of their legislators being women. The time for empty promises is over. Fiji must take concrete action by implementing legal quotas to ensure fair representation. This means providing dedicated funding and training for women candidates, launching comprehensive public education campaigns about the importance of women's leadership. But most importantly, on a week like this week, when CEDAW is in the country collecting their reports, we need to fulfill our binding CEDAW commitments. Our 1997 Constitution provided a clear framework for TSMs, but the current 2013 Constitution creates some ambiguity, unnecessary ambiguity. Section 26(7) must be reformed to explicitly allow for measures that advance women's political participation without being mischaracterized as discriminatory. Internationally, the legal foundations for such measures are rock solid. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the ICCPR, both guarantee equality and non-discrimination. CEDAW specifically endorses TSMs as legitimate tools to accelerate gender equality. The Beijing Platform for Action, which Fiji has committed to, explicitly calls for electoral reforms to improve women's representation. Reserved seats. This is a proven model. We propose that Fiji establish a system of reserved seats guaranteeing women at least 30% representation in parliament. That's 30% representation in parliament. This could be achieved either through dedicated constituencies for women or a quota system within our existing electoral framework. Such a measure would provide guaranteed representation while we work to eliminate the systemic barriers that women face. Globally, reserved seat systems have demonstrated a remarkable success. So we look at Argentina's gender parity law requiring 50% of candidates has resulted in nearly 40% of women's representation in their Congress. Samoa's constitutional amendment, most impressively, Rwanda's 30% quota has led to women holding 64% of parliamentary seats, the highest percentage in the world. We believe that political parties, as the gatekeepers of our democratic process, must also be held accountable for their role in perpetuating gender inequality. While parties should represent the full diversity of Fijian society, in reality, they continue to operate as kind of a boys' club, dominated by masculine leadership models. Instead of combating harmful stereotypes, parties often reinforce them through media strategies and candidate selection processes. They fail to protect women candidates from reputational attacks and rarely develop policies that specifically address women's needs and rights. This is why we advocate for mandatory party quotas requiring at least 50% women candidates, as proposed by the Fiji Women's Forum. Such measures would maintain voter choice while ensuring equal opportunities for women to compete. Importantly, this aligns perfectly with both our constitutional non-discrimination clauses and our international obligations under CEDAW. Just to conclude key priority one before I hand over to Miliana, temporary special measures are exactly that, temporary. They are designed to provide initial support until women can participate on equal footing. Right now, the playing field is not even, nowhere near. The 2026 elections present a perfect opportunity to finally implement these long overdue reforms. Vinaka Level, and thank you for your attention. I'll now pass on to Miliana to speak on key priorities 2 and 3 before concluding and taking your questions.
Thank you. So our second key priority is with regards to reforming of electoral laws that govern political parties. Under this particular key priority, we have 4 issues which we would like to raise to the Commission's attention. The first of these issues is with regards to the registration of political parties. The Political Parties Registration, Conduct, Funding and Disclosures Act of 2013 clearly sets out criteria for party registrations in Fiji. So this includes party identity, constituency numbers, documentations, party protocol, constitution, and so on. The law also includes provisions that restricts individuals from holding party memberships or leadership positions. That is, those who have undischarged bankruptcies, those convicted of offenses with imprisonment of 6 months or more in the past 5 years, and public officers, including members of state bodies, judiciary, police. So while these measures, we understand that they are there to they're designed to ensure legitimacy and integrity, the membership threshold, we believe, is high, and strict eligibility criteria may pose challenges for emerging political movements. Potentially, this limits political diversity and representation. However, there are gaps in this particular provision as well. For example, there happens to be a lack of clarity on the re-entry of individuals who leave public service. There are no clear waiting period before they can engage in political activities. Our second issue is regarding financial transparency. This is to do with declaration of assets and diversification of party funding. The Act emphasizes financial transparency through mandatory disclosures. And we understand that under the law, political parties are to submit an annual financial report to the registrar. And there's a certain time limit that's given, 90 days at the end of the financial year. This report must detail funding sources, donations, and financial transactions. Election candidates are also required to declare their assets, liabilities, and campaign expenditures. However, past cases have shown weaknesses in this requirement, with reports of certain members of parliament and political figures using legal loopholes to evade full disclosure. Additionally, non-compliance should carry stricter penalties, including disqualification from office for willful misrepresentation or failure to declare significant assets. The law also stipulates that political parties can only receive funds from membership fees and individual contributions. It restricts foreign governments, companies, and NGOs to donate, and failure to comply with this particular requirement will result in fines, suspension, or deregistration. The reality is that for women in Fiji, lack of financial resources and support for their campaigns during the elections are one of the key barriers to them getting to leadership positions and into parliament. So this particular part of the law limits political engagement for women in Fiji. We submit that Fiji can look at best practices in neighboring countries to allow broader participation of different sectors. That way, it allows more public funding opportunities for candidates, especially women. The third issue has to do with violence against women in politics. Women in leadership, especially those in parliament, who take up roles traditionally assigned to men, they face significant challenges and barriers. In the context of Pacific, these barriers are systemic and they're deeply rooted in cultural gender stereotypes and norms. This must be recognized and addressed. The already existing gender inequalities in all facets of women's lives also need acknowledgement. Women in politics face constant harassment in the form of derogatory and demeaning remarks, mostly of a highly sexualized nature, something which their male counterparts do not have to endure. A report that interviewed women and men in political spaces in Fiji, Solomon Islands, and PNG captured that women in politics in these three countries are often subjected to psychological violence, hate speech, defamation, character assassination, circulation of obscene materials that depicts them, threats, intimidation, harassment, insults, verbal and physical abuse. With increasing digitalization and the rise of technology and social media platforms, these acts of violence against women in politics are further exacerbated because of it's easy to manipulate information and images nowadays, easiness of sharing such information, and increased accessibility. Women in politics cannot find a safe platform on which they can advocate their political views. They continue to face vilification about their personal choices, dress, lifestyles, and being judged based on their morals, in a way not faced by men. And they are usually held up to a higher standard than that of their male counterparts. Fiji's culture is deeply entrenched in patriarchy and misogyny, and it is critical for Fiji to take effective steps to eliminate harmful gender norms and stereotypes perpetuated against women in politics. These harmful norms and stereotypes are often perpetuated by both mainstream and social media, where female politicians' dress codes or personal choices are discussed instead of their political views. Fiji needs to recognize that violence against women in general has a salutary effect on women engaging in politics, because violence is gendered in its nature and in its form. It has the overall effect of discouraging women from any political activity and achieving their full political rights. It is imperative to fight against impunity and violence, harassment, and discrimination against women in politics, the spaces commonly thought of only for men. Creating safe spaces and an enabling environment for women to fully participate and achieve their political rights is crucial. And an effective way to change attitudes towards women in politics in Fiji is for Fiji to consider criminalizing violence against women in politics. The legislation needs to create an accessible and a safe channel for women to report incidents and receive necessary support, also ensuring their safety and encouraging their participation. We make reference to Bolivia, a country in its effort to foster gender parity has passed landmark law against harassment and discrimination of women political leaders. In Bolivia, the law provides a 2 to 5 year sentence for anyone who pressures, persecutes, harasses, or threatens an elected woman or those exercising their public functions. The penalty for practicing physical, psychological, or sexual aggression is 3 to 8 years imprisonment. In Bolivia's case, they set up a monitoring mechanism through their gender unit to observe and monitor the number of women in positions of power at different levels. And what they have been able to show was that there has been a marked increase in women's political participation in Bolivia since the passing of that landmark legislation in 2012, Law 243. So we are submitting today that, as in the case of Bolivia, it's absolutely necessary to control the exercise of parity by breaking down structural barriers through effective legislation making to achieve parity in political representation in order to generate symbolic and cultural changes in our national political system. On top of that, constant monitoring parity achievements, key development processes, trends, and opportunities affecting gender equality is also crucial. Our fourth issue is leadership accountability and safeguards against corruption. There is an urgent need for stronger laws that restrict political leaders and individuals involved in coups, corruption, and abuse of office to run for elections or hold political position. Individuals who are guilty of these crimes are still allowed to run for elections. And this only shows how weak our laws are in screening and approving electoral candidates, despite provisions that prohibit such individuals. So we call for stronger, more rigorous screening measures in our law. That includes, number one, a democratic fitness test. A test that assesses candidates based on their past adherence to democratic principles, including their involvement in unconstitutional activities such as coups. We do not want those who have carried out acts of violence in the past to be our leaders in the future. Number two, independent integrity committees. We submit that there needs to be an establishment of a neutral body involving non-members of parliament to review candidates' backgrounds, financial dealings, and ethical standing before they are allowed to contest elections. Number three, mandatory anti-corruption training for political leaders. We are saying that elected officials and political candidates, they should require to undergo training on governance, ethical leadership, and financial transparency. And the fourth one is public accountability mechanisms. Introducing a public reporting system where civil society and watchdog organizations are given serious consideration when raising concerns about potential breaches of integrity. Furthermore, political parties are bound by the provisions in the Code of Conduct for political parties, but in our experience, political parties do not generally adhere to ethical standards of respect, uphold democratic processes, uphold human rights, equity, social justice, and non-discrimination principles. As such, we recommend the following reforms to be considered by the Commission. The first one, robust candidate vetting. Establish a robust vetting system that includes background checks on political candidates for human rights violations, corruption, coup involvement, with disqualification criteria for individuals implicated in such activities. Number two, stronger enforcement and independent oversight. Establish an independent electoral ethics commission to oversee compliance, conduct investigations, and issue legally binding recommendations. Number three, mandatory political ethics and gender sensitization training, requiring all political candidates and office holders to undergo gender sensitization, ethics, and governance training to reinforce the principles of inclusivity, democratic leadership, and accountability. So we also submit for the Commission to also see and review Section 115 of the Electoral Act as well. Strengthening internal democracy in political parties is the fourth one. Mandating internal democracy requirements for party leadership selection processes. Ensuring transparency and inclusivity in leadership appointments to enhance party credibility. And the last one that we're recommending is coup-related disqualifications. Enforcing specific provisions to bar individuals directly involved in unconstitutional takeovers from contesting elections unless they're cleared by an independent judicial review. Our third key priority has to do with constituency representation model, geographical. Our current system is a proportional representation model, which, to be very candid, epitomizes the big man, patriarchal, autocratic model. And this discourages independent candidates from contesting elections. Additionally, our past 3 national elections saw candidates with mere hundreds of votes being awarded parliamentary seats over candidates who had thousands of votes. This shows that the voting process is not fair, it's unethical, and complete waste of votes and people's time. This system does not in any way comply with a representative democracy. Furthermore, independent candidates and smaller parties are not able to get seats because this method of voting only favors the bigger parties. We submit that the mark of a true and effective representative democratic country is one in which elected leaders genuinely represent their people. A minister who is in parliament because of his or her political party or the autocratic leader is not effectively representing the electorate. Perhaps it's time to adopt a model that is truly representative. And there are several countries in the Pacific region that uses multiple constituency systems of elections that have worked so far. Vanuatu, the Solomon Islands, and Samoa are a few examples. Fiji have, prior to the 2013 election law reforms, used the same system, including mixed and communal open seats. The advantages of the multiple constituency are, as we know, stronger diverse representation and inclusivity. The voters, they get to choose from their different constituency to ensure their voices are heard in parliament. And this also enables the distribution of power between rural and urban areas, encourages public trust in elections. Candidates from different constituencies are accountable and responsive to their voters, which enhances trust in the political system. And the last one is healthy political competition. This will prevent one party gaining total control if support is not evenly distributed.
Thank you. So in conclusion, our recommendations are as follows. We call for 30% reserved seats for women in parliament. We call for a compulsory party quota where political parties would be required by law through the Constitution or through ordinary legislation to nominate a minimum percentage of female candidates. Number 3, we hope to see tangible measures in place for financial and logistical support for women candidates so they are able to participate fully in their election campaign. We call for efforts to strengthen civic education and awareness programs on voter rights, women's leadership, and societal norms that hinder these election laws. We place urgency on the need for stronger laws that protect women from bullying, harassment, and violence in the media and on online platforms. We call for greater collaboration between political parties, the government and media companies, and women's rights organizations to prevent and eliminate gender bias in media reporting on political issues. We call for a constituency model that is truly representative of people in this country. We strongly recommend mandatory political ethics and gender sensitization training, requiring all political candidates and office holders to undergo gender sensitization, ethics, and governance training to reinforce the principles of inclusivity, democratic leadership, and accountability. Ladies and gentlemen of the Commission, Fiji stands at a crossroads. We can continue with a status quo that marginalizes half of our population. But we can take bold action to build a truly inclusive democracy. At this juncture, the current system empowers and enables the same characters from our past to reappear, survive, and thrive. Those same characters are all men. There's a whole half of the population that is not represented, truly represented in Parliament. And the current system has barriers in place, some visible within your control, within all our control, given the political will, and some barriers are invisible, which these organizations work on daily to eliminate. Reserved seats, party quotas, and targeted support systems are not radical ideas. They are proven solutions that have worked across the Pacific and around the world. Let us be clear. This is not about privileging one group over another. It is about correcting historical injustices and creating a political system that genuinely represents all Fijians. When women thrive, our entire nation thrives, with stronger economies, more effective governance, and better outcomes for all citizens. The time for excuses is over. The time for action is now. We call on this government to seize this historic opportunity and finally deliver on Fiji's promises of equality and democracy. Nakawai.